I'm sorry, I got disconnected. Are we live now?
Yes, I think so, John.
I don't know. I'll check some right in.
That's fine. Good afternoon. Please be advised that the Board of Trustees are participating in this special board meeting with teleconferencing. All actions will be by a roll call vote. I would like to ask board members to respond to the following question as I call your name. Are you able to
Jill,
hear?
there's a recording that's over you.
Helping out friends in the public school system who are
Thank you.
jump.
We'll pause for a moment. Yep.
Homeschool decision.
Okay, let's try it again. Is it still going? Is there?
Yes, ma'am, Mrs. McGrady, there's still a recording on.
Families, we're looking for online and social solutions to be able to engage in from home.
OutSchool isn't meant to replace schooling of any kind.
We're trying to identify where it's coming from. So bear with us for a moment, please.
Classes in person a couple times a year. Now it's held every 2 weeks online.
Instead of 15 or 20 people, we had 50, 75, 100, and our Zoom limit is 100. So there was at least one Zoom that I did where we couldn't accommodate everybody who wanted to be there.
Under the California Department of Education, homeschool.
I checked everything.
Let's try it again. Can you hear a recording going now?
I don't hear anything as of right now, Mrs. McGrady.
Thank you. Everybody else okay? Let's just start over. Good afternoon. Please be advised that the Board of Trustees are participating in this special board meeting with teleconferencing. All actions will be by a roll call vote. I would like to ask board members to respond to the following question as I call your name. Are you able to hear our proceedings on your end? Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Perrell?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Ruffin?
Yes.
Mr. Rush?
Yes.
And Ms. McGrady, I can hear. So we will now go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda would be public comments from the floor for agendized items. The public is invited to address the board on any agenda item. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each, and the total time for public input on each item will be limited to 20 minutes. Are there any comments from the public on agendized items?
Yes, we have several comments from the public this afternoon. We'll start with the first speaker, James Tilton. If at this point in the meeting you have already voted to move this school year online, please disregard this comment. My wife has a condition called CFS. It was triggered by a viral infection. If you search for that condition on YouTube, you might see a video of a young woman named Jessica. In that 4-minute video, Jessica sits up. For the first time, she's sitting up for the first time in 7 years. It's hard to watch. Doctors are afraid that my wife's health could deteriorate to this level if she was to get COVID. It's our deepest fear. It's also the reason why I'm hoping that the board will reconsider its plan to open campuses next month. Experts estimate that 1 out of every 140 LA County residents currently has the virus. Even with some students taking the stay-at-home option, even with students being split into 2 groups, we still have hundreds of students on our campus every day. That means we're likely looking at multiple infection points from the moment of the first bell rings. And in contrast to shoppers at essential retailers, those who are infected will come into prolonged contact with their peers, spending over an hour per period in a small classroom, then jostling through unmonitored hallways into their next class. Even with the proposed safety protocol, I'm afraid that our school outbreak will quickly dwarf the outbreak that we've seen already at summer camps. That's a big risk, not just for parents and students, but for teachers too. Here's the thing about teachers, we are used to taking risks. Not to be dramatic, but every teacher has asked themselves during the lockdown if they sacrifice their own life to save their students. That's a risk we're willing to take. But this pandemic is different. It's a risk that you're asking us to take, not just on our own behalf, but on the behalf of everyone in our home. You're not just asking me if I'm willing to risk my health, you're asking me if I'm willing to risk my wife's health too. My only reply, the only reply, is that I love my students, but I love my wife more. And I hope with everything in me that I won't be forced to choose between the two. The next comment is from Carmen Johnson. If it is safe for teachers and support staff to be on campus, when does the board hold its meetings virtually? The next comment is from Susan Hall. I'm a teacher for students who are developmentally disabled at Antelope Valley High School. I would like to return to the classroom with my students for the opening of the 2021 school year. I feel that my students benefit by in-person teaching due to the need to access materials for functional skills that are concrete and are learned best by hands-on concrete instruction. I'm willing to take every safety precaution and use hygienic solutions in the classroom to allow my students to return safely to school in the classroom where they are best able to access their special education curriculum. Thank you. The next comment is from Anthony Parody. Good afternoon. As a paraeducator, I have been working within our special education department since we went into distance learning. It has been extremely hard on our students, and while most have made an effort to log on with us, there is no substitution for in-classroom learning with our students. Most of them learn more one-on-one with an adult or in small groups, but with an adult who is trained to work with them. My concern is with this distance learning going into the fall semester as well. With our special education population, are we able to send volunteers who could be teachers or other staff to work with them at their homes? If we are once again at home, or is there a modification that could see the special education department on campus in one way or another? Also, with everything going on, there has been a lot of misinformation. What are the plans for classified employees this year? Will there be layoffs in the 2021 school year? The next comment is from Christian Green. Keeping the schools closed and only participating in distance learning during this pandemic. The next comment is from Michaeline White. I'm a Spanish teacher at Little Rock High School. This will be my 13th year teaching at Little Rock and my 16th year in the district. This will be my 33rd year as a teacher. I have been in discussions with my department about how to conduct our classes this fall. We discussed the difficulty of having students at school with all of their requirements of social distancing, masks, sanitizing the classrooms, and many other situations. I am of the opinion that it would be better to go completely online for about 6 weeks and train teachers and staff thoroughly in how to have students physically in the classroom. Then we can use a blended model to ease back into eventually having all students back. I'm speaking only about myself and I do not claim to represent anybody else. Thank you for this opportunity to voice my opinion. Little Rock is the best school I have worked at in all my years as a teacher. I have total respect and confidence in the entire staff at Little Rock High School. The next comment is from Arlene Thomas. Thank you for allowing me to address the board regarding my concerns for the upcoming school year. My name is Arlene Thomas, and I have 2 sons that attend Lancaster High School. I know teachers and students are eager to return to the classroom. However, it is critically important that schools open in August in a responsible manner because the #1 priority has to be students, staff, and community safety. According to science and data, there's a surge in cases, and the order has been given to close indoor businesses across the state. At this time of dialing back openings, I do not support the reopening of school buildings to students. If restrictions have been given to gyms, places of worship, personal care services, hair salons, barbershops, and malls, how is the reopening of school buildings safe? It is your responsibility to keep the vulnerable safe and to keep your staff safe and to keep all of the Antelope Valley Union High School District's families safe so that when conditions are more favorable for a safe return to buildings, everyone is healthy and can return. I hope this board is in agreement with the superintendent's recommendations to take the action of beginning the 2021 school year in an at-home distance learning model. Furthermore, I am requesting that a more rigorous and accountable distance learning experience be offered for students. I think we all understand that it needs to look different than it did in March. I would like to see teachers provide live daily lessons in a virtual format. A set schedule similar to what students would follow in an in-school setting would help provide the structure necessary for students to be successful. I am confident this board and the superintendent of the Antelope Valley High School District will provide the tools, resources, and guidance to teachers and students necessary to continue to provide the excellent education my kids have received prior to this pandemic. Thank you. The next comment is from Kyle Henderson. He writes, yes. The next comment is from Sharona Smith. We need to continue distance learning to help stop the spread of COVID. If school sites were to be opened, students, teachers, and staff would all be put at risk. The next comment is from Jeannie Smith. I understand that there's a lot of fear and concern with the COVID-19 virus. Thank you for taking our input and comments on the subject of school attendance for 2021 school year. I'm a mother of 5, 3 of whom have graduated from this district. I am also a registered nurse and have been working on the front line since the beginning of the virus outbreak. It is my opinion it is crucial on so many levels that students are in classes for their education. The damage to our students by keeping them home will be long lasting. Many studies have shown the risk for young people is very low for the virus. Adult teachers and staff can take precautions to keep them safe, or they can be part of the online learning for those who want that option. My husband is a teacher and has a serious heart condition, but he is willing to go back to the classroom without hesitation. While not all staff will agree with in-class instruction, I know many teachers that do want to be back in class in person. On the other hand, keeping students out of school keeps and puts them at risk for sexual and physical abuse, mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and even suicide. Schools provide so much more than a crucial education. They're the lifeline to many students who receive multiple services on a daily basis. Many of our students at AVUHSD are already at risk for dropping out and not graduating. Moving to an online will increase the fail and dropout rate and result in lasting devastation to our community. I will state again, the risk of the virus is very, very low. The societal risk of keeping students out of the classroom are extremely dangerous. Please consider opening our schools. The next comment is from Julie Edwards. Hello, my son is starting 9th grade in the fall. My son has been indoors since March of 2020 when our schools were first shut down. It wasn't until last week when Coach Coleman reached out to all the incoming 9th graders that I saw him excited about something. My son left our home and went on campus for the first time last Monday to sign up for football. And while I understand that we all have concerns about COVID, I would like to know what we were doing in regards to sports. If practices are being held outside, can they continue? If they continue to social distance, can they continue? This may have been addressed during the meeting prior to comments, and if it was, I hope that it's considered that sports practices can continue. Our children need some sense of normalcy. Thanks. The next comment is from Flora Martinez Pena. I don't feel safe sending my kids to school because my daughter is a type 1 diabetic. Next comment is from Katie Asta. I completely support and appreciate Dr. Vieira's guidance. This will mark my 34th year in this district. While I think all of us would love to return to our classrooms, with the fluidity of the current COVID-19 situation, it's in everyone's best interest to use full distance learning to begin this semester, monitor and evaluate the pandemic, and then ease into a blended learning if warranted. Safety must be our top priority. We cannot afford to lose students or staff or infect anyone's family members. I suggest the district provide parents with guidelines to help them with their children. Thank you, Dr. Vieira. The next comment is from Andrea Chappé. If it is not safe to hold a board meeting in person where it's easy to stay 6 feet apart by placement of seats and there is staff with plenty of time to clean and sanitize the room before the next meeting, then why is it safe to be physically back in schools? Even with the A and B scheduling of the hybrid class and the other students distance learning, there will still be too many students in class to maintain proper social distancing. Students will crowd to get in and out of classes and from one quad to another. It will be difficult to impossible to make sure all students keep on their mask and wear them properly. There's also only a short time between periods in which class will need to be cleaned and sanitized before the next group. Are teachers expected to clean and sanitize between classes? If so, when are we going to be able to use the restroom or set up for the next class? Who is going to supply us with the sanitizing equipment? Students will more than likely be hanging out with their friends before and after school, traveling on school or city buses, which may or may not be sanitized. This could also allow for even more transmission of the coronavirus. We as teachers and as a district have had a quarter to try and figure out distance learning. We know what has worked for us so far and what has not. The students have also had time to adjust to the idea of distance learning, and some have even thrived in that environment. We know that asynchronous learning does not work. We have learned from other school districts that students need a schedule to keep them on track, and therefore we are trying synchronous learning, which worked well for my own daughter in 8th grade. I would love for us to go back to a full, regular physical schooling, but not at the risk of my students, their families, my health, my families, or my health. Sacrificing in-person teaching and learning for a semester or a full year is definitely worth even one life. I know very few children have died from COVID, but they still can catch it and transmit it to others. Could you imagine the emotional damage a child would have if they brought home the coronavirus from school, infected their family, and had a family member die from it? That would damage the child for life, way more than a semester or even a year of distance learning. I care too much for my past and future students to ever want them to have to go through that type of trauma. So if you have any doubt as to whether or not we should go 100% digital in the fall, please remember the safety and lives of our students and their families are the absolute most important thing. The next comment is from Anthony Alvarez. I believe the safety of our children and your staff is paramount to all involved. Having said that, is it possible to consider a limited in-person schedule for our special education students who really need the hands-on learning environment that as parents are not trained to give our children? Since the pre-vocational classes are smaller than regular classes, would it be realistic to have a small ratio with parent and aide interaction? Any in-person instruction would be greatly appreciated and more beneficial to our special education students. The next comment is from Tiffany Joyner. Is it possible for the Antelope Valley School District to consider returning to the track system? This way students can begin going to school in person with smaller class sizes all year round. With the limited amount of parents willing to send their kids back, this should result in an appropriate amount of students in the classroom. I can tell you firsthand that not all children thrive in this learning style. Also, it would be appreciated if teachers would consider alternative office hours other than just mornings, so that the students with essential working parents can be available. It's not always convenient for a morning Zoom meeting when some students are at daycare while parents are working. I only ask that you get the opinion from those working when making final decisions for our children as well. Our children are home alone, studying alone, figuring out problems alone, and are being punished educationally because their parents are essential. Thank you. The next comment comes from a concerned parent. Good evening. Today I come to the board, not only as a parent of students currently enrolled in this district, but as an employee and community member. We appreciate the survey sent to parents asking what our preference is. I selected the at-school learning blended model. The reason for my public comment is to express my disappointment with our administrators. Although I know we have to follow what similar districts are doing, I truly believe that we had other unexplored options. You could have liability waivers for those of us who want our students to attend the blended program. Many of us noticed how in the end of the semester affected our students' eagerness to learn. Most students were completely disconnected. Can you please share student engagement data? What percentage of students were successful with online learning? You could have opted to reopen with AM/PM sessions to avoid possible layoffs of paraeducators or other staff that will be severely impacted by this at-home learning choice. You could have students groups stay in certain classes while the teachers rotated to teach the groups instead of having students move from class to class to attend the next period. You could have done many things, but opted to not ask faculty and staff for feedback prior to the survey. Have you ever heard the saying, 2 heads are better than 1? You missed many opportunities. Administrators are not the only ones with viable options. All you had to do is ask. As you know, our state ranks number 21 in education and overall number 37. Can we really afford to not have our students in a classroom? Don't we have that choice as parents? Don't we know what's best for our children? Many students are severely depressed. Some can't even put 2 sentences together, let alone tell their parents or adults how they feel. Our children need a lot of mental health counseling, not only a flyer stating what options are available. Why did you not include a mandatory short session to teach coping mechanisms such as meditation or counseling podcasts or outlines teaching them how to speak up or ask for help? AVUHSD, you can do better. It may take extra effort, but our children in this country's future are worth it. Don't you agree? Thank you. The next comment is from Chris Crowley. If the health and safety of our children cannot be guaranteed, this should be an easy answer for parents. With that, shame on you if you feel your teachers and staff are expendable. The children being a little behind is not a valid reason to put them, their families, and your staff at risk. The next comment is from Beth Catano. Dear board members, my name is Beth Catano and I'm a math teacher at Antelope Valley High School. While the decision to go fully distance learning is difficult for all of us, it particularly affects our communities of color. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American who graduated from AVHS and now teach at my alma mater. I have heard many comments from colleagues and community members that poor students of color are particularly at risk because they face domestic violence, food insecurity, and mental health problems, in addition to having parents who must work to pay whatever bills they can. This is all true, but it was all true prior to the pandemic and will be after until we start facing the inequity in our society. The decision to go distance learning instead must be based on science, and the science overwhelmingly tells us that it's unsafe to reopen. The parents of my students and my own family members risk their lives daily because we have reopened too quickly. Instead of forcing teachers, students, and their parent workers to risk their lives, we should instead be advocating for more financial support from our elected leaders in Sacramento and Washington. Until that occurs, it is not safe to reopen schools or force parents to work, and it continues the very inequity that others are so concerned with. Thank you for your time and support. The next comment is unnamed. Can the Antelope Valley please be monitored apart from LA County COVID numbers in determining reopening schools? We need Catherine Barker's advocacy. The decision to reopen Antelope Valley schools must be based on our AV community COVID numbers apart from LA County due to our isolated region. To count our community along with LA County is to align our data with communities 30 to 90 miles away. The next comment is from Cheryl Holgan. Get Antelope Valley schools back open, please. Our COVID data is closer to Kern counties than it is to Los Angeles counties. Again, our schools are closed based on data from a region 60 miles to our south. Kern County is not on the watch list nor the governor's monitoring list. Are those the same list? Please give this careful consideration when voting to close or reopen our Antelope Valley schools. There is also data from a recent study in Germany that clearly shows low to no infection transmission from school-aged children. Google Germany study COVID school infection rates July 13th and see for yourself. Something else to consider when viewing COVID data here in California. The number of COVID patients who have recovered is never shown on charts or data broadcasts from Los Angeles. Mayor Paris publishes this data for our community in his weekly update. Please make an informed decision with the proper data. Reopen our AV schools and allow our children to obtain the education they deserve while getting families back to work. Thank you for working for our AV community. The next comment is from Dwayne Schrobat. Antelope Valley School Board, greetings. Thank you for taking some time to address many of the concerns related to a return to school this fall. My input comes from the perspective of being an essential worker, having to interact with thousands of people over the last several months. I believe teachers are more than essential. They are critical to the success of our society in dealing with the virus and interpersonal relationships. I have not seen a single designated essential environment like grocery stores, gas stations, general services like home deliveries, excluding young or elderly populations. If all those services create an environment where we as essential workers must deal with the risk, then it would make sense that teachers can join the whole of community approach. You see, none of us, thousands, can continue to provide essential services without the teachers stepping into this arena with risk and succeed until a vaccine, if that even happens, is made available. There are now an abundance of knowledge about finding and providing treatments when positive persons are identified. The Plant 42 employers are doing all of the things needed to keep the workflow going. We need you to provide our children a place to go and learn while the rest of us continue to support you in acquiring the services you need. My input has nothing to do with the supposed science, given that it's too confusing to navigate for the average essential worker. It's entirely about your commitment to our children and willingness to deal with the same risk thousands of us continue to deal with daily, knowing that since the inception of America, it's an all-in approach towards overcoming a danger that can't be avoided. This country has lost many amazing people in wars, epidemics, and internal strife. The stay-at-home approach was supposed to give us time to plan and not become an on-off button that will ruin our lives. The virtual approach is great for teachers, but thousands of employees can't just stay home with inadequate resources to make sure their children are being educated. It's not the government that will succeed alone, but all of us taking the appropriate cautions and accepting the risk while lifting one another up during this stressful time. My last input is that millions of us over the last 50 years have served overseas, have taken shots and meds with side effects in an attempt to protect us in various risky situations. Even many of the board or teachers have had to take medication that the pharmacist will pull you aside and read the potential side effects that include stroke or death. We are all warriors right now. Many single parents are struggling to provide for their children and your needs as well. Once again, we need you to join.
Mr. Furno, where are we on time?
Your timing is impeccable, Ms. McGrady. We actually hit 20 minutes with that last public comment.
Okay, thank you. I believe we have more. Our 20 minutes are up. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to move on. Board, what do you say?
I would like to continue to hear from the community.
Mr. Rush?
I'm all right with hearing what everybody has to say.
Ms. Perrell?
Yes, I think it'd be a good idea to listen to the rest of the comments that the community has made.
Mr. Johnson?
I'm in favor of listening to the rest.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on.
The next comment is from Amos Wellington. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Amos Wellington, and I am a teacher in the district. And I just wanted to raise a few concerns as we discuss the possibility of returning to our campuses in 27 days. Nationally, we have seen in the past several weeks a spike in the daily number of positive COVID-19 cases. What we are also beginning to see are the lingering effects of this upper respiratory virus. You are all educated individuals and are reading the reports from the CDC, from the Los Angeles County Office of Health, and other reputable medical organizations. I want to share a few facts that won't be found in any of the aforementioned journals or on their websites. I am a teacher. That means when parents drop their students off at my school and they report to my classroom or the field to meet me for physical education class, that I am responsible for that life of the child. That means if an armed assailant somehow enters my classroom, that I will put myself in harm's way to protect the lives of each and every child in my classroom. That means if there is a shooting on the street outside of my field or outside in the park adjacent to where my classroom meets, that I will do whatever is necessary up to and including laying down my life to ensure that each of my students is returned to their families. Those previously mentioned scenarios involve a physical threat that we can see, a gunman, a drive-by shooting, some gang situation that spills its way onto campus, over our fence, or through an open gate. 2020 has not been about a visible threat. It has been about an unseen enemy, one that has made us at times cocky, arrogant, juvenile in our behavior as it relates to the following simple directives, like wearing a mask to protect each of us from an airborne, invisible enemy. It has also been about mental health terms like cabin fever, which have become buzzwords. The rates of suicide and suicide attempts have risen markedly along with the virus. Many causes, loss of income, domestic abuse, loneliness, despair, discouragement in mass. With all these truths at our feet, we must still start school in a virtual capacity. You have read, you have heard, that you will continue to hear this evening's testimonies from diabetics, from those who suffer from asthma, that have chronic allergies, those that are morbidly obese and have conditions that would create a volatile situation if they were to encounter COVID-19. As we left campuses on March 13th, there were enough cases in Los Angeles County to shut down schools. At the time of this writing, there are over 147,000 positive cases with 3,950 plus deaths. In Los Angeles County show that the Latinx community represents 46% of all cases. Our district's 2/3 Latinx. Many of our families live in multi-generational households.
30 seconds.
This proportionately affects Black and Brown communities in the areas of health, physical, mental, emotional, and social. In addition to punitive statistics, what is our plan to implement the safe return to classrooms for all stakeholders? Who is going to provide PPE for staff, faculty, and students? Who is going to do the work of disinfecting and cleaning each workstation before a new class enters? How can we look one another in the eye and say there is a number of students? The next comment is from Carla George. She writes, at-home learning model. The next comment is from Ada Martinez. Good afternoon. I would like to first and foremost thank Dr. Vera for his recommendation to begin the 2021 school year in the at-home distance learning model. As educators, our priority has been and will always be the safety and well-being of our students. Unfortunately, because of the increasing number of positive COVID-19 cases in Los Angeles County, the classroom continues to be an unsafe place for our students. In addition, our AVUHSD family works tirelessly to serve our community. Their safety and well-being must also be safeguarded. If we open our district, we will expose our community. To what extent is unknown. However, to risk even one life is one too many. Today, along with other colleagues, I want to implore you to accept and approve Dr. Vieira's recommendation for at-home distance learning. Thank you for your time. The next comment is from Maria Galinda. Good afternoon, members of the board, Superintendent Vieira. I would like to thank you for holding this meeting and allowing me to submit a comment. I understand it's not an easy decision, but I wholeheartedly urge you to accept Dr. Vieira's recommendation to have our district be fully online distance learning. I believe it's in the best interest of the students, their families, as well as our staff and their families. We would all love to return to campuses, but there is too much at stake, and I applaud you for taking the health and the well-being of our community, of our students and staff as the top priority. This pandemic is disproportionately affecting Black, Latinx, and as well as other people of color. Looking at the data and our demographics of our community, reopening the schools would disproportionately affect our students, families, and staff of color. Again, I know each of you did not reach this decision lightly, but right now we must prepare and put forth our efforts to developing our online curriculum and systems to better serve our students. Our energies, resources, and mind power can be dedicated to making this year the best it can be given our circumstances, once we know that we are not going to be asked to put ourselves or our students in harm's way. Thank you for your consideration and time. The last comment is from Vivian Eskridge. Until there is a true plan of action made with facts and not with threats, all of our kids and teachers should remain home and not be made as pawns with politicians at the expense of their lives. That concludes all the public comments this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Moving forward, we are at D on the agenda to approve the learning model options for families plan and return to the 2020-21 school year in the at-home learning model full distance learning. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the learning model options for families plan and return to the 2020-2021 school year in the at-home learning model, which is full distance learning. May I have a motion to get it on the floor?
Motion.
Thank you. That was Ms. Perrell. Second,
Second.
Mr. Rush. Thank you. So before we move forward, Mr. Nehan has a presentation prepared for us. Governor Newsom stated in a news conference today at noon, for any of you that did not hear it, I'm going to kind of try to quote him. He said, "We know that students, teachers, staff, and parents prefer in-class instruction, but we also know that we can only do it if it can be done safely for all concerned, and that safety is determined by the local health data." He further stated that all schools in LA County and all counties that are on the watch list must begin, are required to begin school with distance learning. That came out at noon today. So where we are right now is, board, would you like to hear the presentation Mr. Nehan prepared, or would you rather go directly to discussion?
Mrs. McGrady, there was a reason why you chose to tell us about Governor Newsom's statement, correct?
Yes, because, okay, that came out at noon today. We are required to go to distance learning.
Okay, great. And so then Mr. Nehan's options are going to present what the community and Dr. Vieira's team has created for our district as our distant learning options for the Antelope Valley Union High School District, correct?
That is correct. We received it. You received it. We all received it last week.
I'm aware of it, but I'm just repeating this for the community to be informed, because this is being recorded and it's for the record. And this is more so for transparency, to be transparent for the community to hear it.
Okay, so, thank you. Let's have Mr. Nehan give his presentation. Thank you. Mr. Nehan, please.
Good afternoon, members of the board. The presentation will be brief. Wait till it comes up. Mr. Allen, can I trouble you to go to slide 1? There we go. So what I have for you today is the documentation and the process we went through to develop these learning model options for our families. And there's multiple options because we have to be somewhat agile in adapting to the ever-changing environment. Next slide, please. Since the outbreak of COVID and dealing with the shutdown back in March of 2020, the district has followed 2 guiding principles. Number 1, it's been maintaining continuity of learning for students, and all that while continuing to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And those are the 2 guiding principles that we follow, and those are somewhat of the pinnacle or the top of the pyramid of what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide. In addition to our principles, we have some documents that we must follow. The first is the public health order for reopening protocols for K-12 schools, and that came out earlier this week, and it's essentially a checklist of all the things that districts and schools must do in order to open. The second is Senate Bill 98. This was the trailer language to the 2021 school year, but it has a number of components that schools must meet while delivering blended and distance learning. And then, as Ms. McGrady mentioned, today, the governor put out his monitoring list, which now there are requirements that we must meet as a county in order for our districts to be able to reopen to students. Next slide, please. And then finally, some of the guiding resources. We put out 2 surveys to our family and staff to get a sense of what their priorities were with regards to distance learning, to the type of instructional delivery options that we could make available to them. And then we also put together an instructional delivery options planning committee. The committee was comprised of teachers, site and district administrators. There were labor group representatives, as well as counselors. This committee met 4 times, probably a total of 6 to 6.5 hours that we met. That was all virtual meeting. And then, so what we came up with was, next slide, was our learning models for families. And basically it's twofold. There's an at-school learning model, and it's a blended model because we knew that if conditions permitted, not all parents and students were comfortable returning to campus. So regardless of what the conditions were, we knew that we had to provide options for students to continue to learn at home. And then we have the at-home learning model, which is where we'll start the presentation. And we've always had independent study. For a number of years, we've had our dependent charter, the AAV Virtual Academy, which is a 7/12 virtual program, and then our distance learning program. Next slide. And the at-home distance learning model, as I show you these schedules, please note that start and end times and breaks and lunches are subject to change. There may be certain requirements with regards to transportation or with regards to some other elements where the times would need to fluctuate slightly. They wouldn't be dramatic, but in this model, all students will be at home or away from campus, and they connect to their classes in a completely virtual environment. Students can access live and pre-recorded lessons virtually. And what this model does, and it'll become clear as I go through it a little bit more, is when conditions permit that some students can come back on campus, it allows us for a smooth transition and allows us to run the blended model with at school and at home learning models running concurrently. And the schedule is intentionally built to be able to accommodate students wishing to remain at home learning once return to school becomes allowable. And then the teachers, in addition to their virtual instruction live, are also available virtually for office hours, for tutoring, for additional instruction after school each day of the week, as well as on Wednesdays. Next slide. So based on the governor's comments, we know that we're starting with an at-home learning model. And so essentially, we have the students grouped into Group A and Group B for a transition back to campus when an at-school learning model is permissible. But in this case, students would log in to their first period class, for example, on Mondays and Thursdays. All students would log in. They would have access to a live teacher as well as to pre-recorded lessons. And each of those periods is somewhere between 70 and 80 minutes, depending on the requirements of SB 98 that we have to comport with. The teachers run 3 classes a day, and then after lunch and some transition time, the teachers are available to their students virtually for, again, office hours, for additional support, additional instruction, clarification, things of that nature. No live instruction is offered on Wednesdays. However, the students will all be able to log into their learning management system and access new content and also be able to reach their teachers through office hours at a different schedule time. So it allows for some flexibility. I believe one parent commented that there was the need for some flexibility in the office hours. That's the model that we'll be starting with. Is there, Ms. McGrady, I have the other schedules of the blended model. Would you like me to continue with those?
Yes, please.
Okay, next slide. So the at-school learning model is the blended program. And as I discussed, when permissible, some students will be able to transition to campus. However, some students will remain on campus. And this is where dividing students into groups A and B becomes important. So all students are divided into groups A and B, and it allows for half of the students to be present and half of the students to learn virtually, of those in the blended program. Those who continue at home log in just as their previous schedule for the at-home learning model dictated. Students, everything is the same, except now students are on campus 2 days a week. They have access to each of their teachers for one 70-minute period. This allows us to keep our class sizes smaller. This allows us to physically distance as appropriate, and allows us to clean, sanitize, and then some more time for deep cleaning 2 days a week to make sure that our campuses remain safe. The students will still have access to their teachers virtually through their virtual office hours after school and on Wednesdays, and that's for all students. Next slide. So this is what the schedule looks like. If you're in Group A, you would go to school on Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, you would go to periods 1, 2, and 3. On Tuesday, periods 4, 5, and 6. There's the possibility for a breakfast service before. There's 2 brief breaks. The breaks were intentionally condensed to prevent the congregation time and to allow for students to transition from one class to the next. They get a little bit of a mental break, but then there's not the exposure time, which is currently 15 minutes. And we've also moved the lunch and the transition time to after the last class. Students can take a grab and go lunch with them as they leave, or if they don't want the lunch, then they can just leave campus. They go back home, they access their teachers through office hours or access additional work through their LMS. And all of that is taken care of virtually. Now, understanding that our special education students need a little bit more support. Next slide, please. We have 2 different models for our special education students. Our resource or study skills students would be in groups A or B. And instead of leaving after lunch, those students would have an additional hour and 20 minutes with their case carrier for additional supports as provided in their IEP, for a little bit more in-person contact and making sure that they are keeping up with all of their classes. And then the last slide, please, Gary. And then finally, the at-school learning model for all of our special day class students. Once permissible, we would have all special ed SDC students on campus 4 days a week so that they can receive the specialized services that all of them uniquely require. And I think that was mentioned by a couple of different parents, the unique needs of these students. We're not at a place where we can implement this schedule at this point. However, when we come back to that, then SDC students would be able to access this. If the parents did not want that, then we could still continue to work with those students in the at-home learning model. And that's the presentation. I know I went a little bit fast, but with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nehan. Do we have any questions or any discussion?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Nehan. Great presentation. I really appreciate you sharing the models. And again, I'm reiterating this more so for the community to be fully informed about our models that we have. Could you shed some light for the community about what are our projections from an enrollment stance of how many students we're projected to be in a distance learning model versus our independent study model and our Antelope Valley Union High School District virtual high school model? How many students per each one of those models are we projecting to be in each of those categories?
Dr. Ruffin, I don't have the total number projected, but I do have the number of, based on our last survey, the number who expressed interest in those programs. For the independent study program, and it may be inclusive of students already there. It was under 150, and this was as of yesterday. This is before the governor's comments today, but the number of parents who responded to the survey expressed interest in independent study was just under 150. And for our virtual academy through the Academies of the Antelope Valley, it was under 100. It was somewhere around 85 students. I can get you the exact numbers, and they may have changed based on the governor's comments today, but that's where we stood. I don't have the total enrollment of each of those, and we could do projections, but wouldn't know exact numbers until we actually have the students enrolled.
So then roughly what would that leave us? Because we should kind of have an amount of students that we're expected for enrollment for the 2021 school year. Roughly how many are we looking at for distance learning for next year?
You mean the remaining number of students who would be
Yes.
enrolled with us for participate? It'd be somewhere around 19,000 students.
19,000, okay. And then how many hours are we projected to have for our students that are going to be directly doing for the distance learning, that are going to actually be doing live Zoom? Because when we're talking about virtual, I see that some of those are live and some of those are pre-recorded.
Right, and so SB 98 lays out under the blended model a number of instructional minutes. However, under an at-home or full virtual model, the instructional minutes are a total of 240 minutes a day, and that includes both live instruction and contact with the teacher, as well as assignments and work that the students may do independently. So there's not a clear answer on what the amount of work students would be doing, but we know what the minimum requirements are. And we're still waiting for the controller's office to put out the audit guide that would be used in assessing those numbers.
Okay, can we get a commitment from our school district about how many live hours we're willing to commit to our students, considering there was so much sentiments from our community that expressed an overwhelming need for our students to connect with our teachers, and the commitment should reflect that need to really not be in a space of where we're giving our students an opportunity to be working from such an independent space. I'm not really sure of the number of students within our district that are students who are IWINs, individuals with exceptional needs. I'm quite sure that there is a level of supports for our students who are special needs students. However, our students, do need that special communication from our teachers, and I'm sure that our teachers are more than willing to support them in that capacity, especially since that time is already zoned off. I would like for our school district to be able to commit to some face time with our students as well, if we can get that number of minutes, if we can commit to that for them.
Under the distance learning model, the number of minutes of live instruction would meet the 240 minutes 4 days a week. And then you have the additional office hours each afternoon, and then on Wednesday for 2 hours.
Okay.
We have any other comments, or questions?
Yeah, before we take a vote, actually, yes, I did want to make some other comments. But not so much about the presentation. I don't know if any other board members wanted to make any more comments about the presentation. So I can just hold.
We're only here on the one item. That's the only thing this meeting is about, is just
No,
this.
I know that. I'm just saying, I didn't know if any of the other board members had comments about the presentation.
I will just say thank you to Mr. Nehan for sort of going into detail about that. I know that I had a lot of students talking to me and I invited them to watch this meeting, and I'm sure you cleared up a lot of information. So thank you, Mr. Nehan.
Okay, so Mr. Nehan, thank you again. And still on this same topic, Mrs. McGrady, I wanted to really thank the community. I wanted to thank all of the parents for and all of the concerned constituents who emailed, who called, who expressed their concerns to Dr. Vieira. I had an opportunity to speak to a lot of people within the community. As you can see, this is a very iterative process about the well-being of our students in the reopening. It is in fact because of your concerns that we are here today in a special meeting about these issues. And if you guys had not called in and expressed your concerns, I don't think that we would be having this conversation and being as transparent as we are. I do not, and I haven't seen a plan that has provides a sense of safety for the students and the teachers for the Antelope Valley Union High School districts. We are approximately 3 to 4 weeks away from fall instruction. And this is really the first time that this board has met to vote on whether or not we're going to reopen our schools. Superintendent Tony Thurman, who local medical experts and other superintendents in various school districts around the United States, around California, have expressed their sentiments about not opening their schools, and they haven't. I think that our babies are our prized possessions in their lives, their safeties, as well as the safety of our teachers and our staff that teach them are important to us. And it's imperative that we consider their lives as we finalize our plans for the fall. And we have to go back to the fact that this is an iterative process. We must consider that not only the different learning models, but how effective are those learning models? When we're talking about their safeties, are we thinking about too, you know, our teachers were in, they were in combat mode, just trying to get our students through last year. They were in combat mode. I still have teachers calling me now. I have parents calling me now about grading practices. I had a parent call me this morning for a student who's over at Soar High School for summer school. With grading practices that she has concerns about. Her child was responsible for going through 9 videos. And because she hasn't gone through 9 videos and we've only been in summer school for 2 weeks, the child is failing. So there's some things that we need to work on. There's some technology issues. Most of our kids in this community their parents are essential workers. Do all of our students have the technology that they need? Do they have the hotspots to be able to access the things that we're asking them to do? Do our teachers have the technology that they need? Do they have the training that they need to meet our students where they are? Do all of our teachers, you know, even our teachers that are 50 and over, the research is showing that 1/3 of the teachers have already said that they weren't going to come back. While we were listening as board members, waiting to get on this call, some of the data was being spat out to us that a lot of students from AVUHSD who are low socially, economically disadvantaged foster youth have not even logged on since March. Have we looked at our data that has even shown us what is happening with our students in these areas? There is no one size fits all model. And I know that Mr. Nehan, I know that the teachers and the people and the staff within our community are working hard, but it's gonna take a lot of work, and we're gonna keep having to go back to the drawing board because things are gonna constantly change. This is a pandemic. We are gonna constantly have to come back to the drawing board and figure it out and be patient with one another and have to work with one another to figure it out and come back to the drawing board. That's all I'm asking for our community to do, to keep raising the questions, but never can we ever ignore the fact that we have to be present for our students. We have to be present for our teachers, and we have to be present too for our administrators. I'm not hearing here what's going to happen to our administrators, what's happening with our counselors. I haven't heard anything. I don't hear a strategic plan from our district about I hear what's happening with the students when they're not going to be there, but what's happening with our counselors? Are we intending on hiring more custodians to support the cleaning? I know we paid for like almost 20,000 masks. Are we gonna pay for more masks for students? Because we're anticipating, I think the number was something about what, 19,000? If we ordered 20,000 masks, these students are gonna go through those masks. So it's a lot of things that we need to do. Mr. Meehan also said in his presentation that there was guiding resources. The committee consisted of teachers, site and district administrators, labor group representatives, and counselors. I didn't hear anybody from the community being represented, any parents. I didn't hear anybody from special education being a part of those committees. I would love for it to be more comprehensive and more representative of those voices that I heard in the comments, so that we can get all perspectives and all views. And I would also love to see a phase-in process. The governor said that we have to be on distance learning, but what happens if we get control of this within the next 6 weeks? What are we planning on? Are we gonna wait to 6 weeks before we get together and say, well, what is gonna be our next phase? Are we gonna phase in our IWIN students? Are we gonna say, now it's time for us to put in our seniors? What are we gonna do to get ahead of it? I would love for Dr. Vieira to give this district and the community members his strategic plan for COVID, as was asked over 6 weeks ago. And I'm gonna end my comments there. Thank you so much for the work that we're doing. I'm so happy that this board is considering the community's comments. And I'm hoping that we are in agreement with our community to keep our students and our staff safe and well.
Thank you. Any other board members have any comments or questions that you'd like to make? Hearing none, we'll go to the vote. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Perrell.
Aye.
Dr. Ruffin.
Yes.
Mr. Rush.
Aye.
And Ms. McGrady, aye. So that passed. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
That was Ms. Perrell. A second?
Second.
Mr. Rush, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Johnson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Perrell?
Aye.
Dr. Ruffin?
Yes.
That was a yes. Mr. Rush?
Aye.
Aye. And Ms. McGrady, aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much.